we're going to head all the way to Toronto virtually with our good friend Ted Kritsonos. He's had a chance to review one of the latest LG smartphones, and are two screens better than one? We've talked about foldable phones from Samsung and HTC and Motorola. Well, LG has taken a different take on this. Thanks for joining us, Ted.
Happy to be with you guys.
So this phone has two screens, but it's not a folding LCD screen, so to speak. Explain to our listeners how this all works.
Yeah, so it's the LG V60 ThinQ. You're not committing to the two screens, so you can actually buy this phone just as a regular phone. You don't have to get the second screen, but there is an attachment that you can put the phone into that has a second screen that is attached to it. And what happens is when they're connected, you can activate the second screen to work either together with the main screen or independently of the main screen. So in other words, you can have one app on one and then one app open on the other. So for multitasking or doing two things at the same time, it is very, very useful in that regard.
Who is this aimed at, Ted?
It's a good question. It's a good question. Because first of all, if you're going to use a device like this, like unlike the Galaxy Fold or what Samsung's worked on, anytime we've seen like a dual screen device, normally what they're trying to do is to make it easy to wield, pocketable, something that it doesn't feel like it's too thick. This is not the case here. This is a big phone. I mean, first of all, it's like, it's a 6.4 inch display. So it's a large screen. Now multiply that by 2, right? And then add extra thickness because the case that comes with the screen is also pretty thick. So what you have is a phone that together weighs 350 grams, way more. Like that's more than double, the average smartphone. And also you're getting double the thickness too, for the most part. So you have to be okay with that kind of size to begin with before you even, contemplate going with this thing. But if you're a multitasker, if you're somebody who really wants to be able to watch a video, let's say, on one screen and then do something productive on the other. So you're messaging somebody on one screen and then you got a video going on the other, or you have two messaging apps at the same time. You've got Slack and Trello open at the same time. That might be appealing. To me, I think those are the main factors. You want to entertain yourself by having content on two screens, or you want to be productive by multitasking on two screens.
Does it come with both screens, or you just buy the phone itself and then you got to purchase the second screen after?
You have the option to do either way. So you can buy them together or you can buy the phone separately and then decide to get the attachment later. But they do sell them together if you want to.
What's the total cost of that, that bundle?
You know what? Last I saw, it was about $1,000, I think. If I remember correctly, let me double check that because I think it was about $1,000 last time I saw. Which is actually what the previous. Now, this is not the first time LG's done this, by the way, because we know that the LG G8X that came out last year was the same concept. It was this dual screen concept. Put the phone into this holster, activates a second screen. So this is the second iteration of that, but this one is considerably better, in my opinion, than the first version. The screen is better. The internals are better. The battery life. Actually, you'd be surprised. The battery life is actually quite good on this device. You would think that with a second screen, it would be problematic. It is not. This thing will last a full day, even if you are using both screens for the full day. So it's quite good in that regard.
The dual screen concept is kind of interesting in this respect. But one question I have, Ted, is that second screen, is it really just another smartphone or is it basically just like an LCD monitor, if you will, that doesn't have any brains inside it? So you couldn't just break out that second screen and give it to one kid and give the main phone to another kid. So you have, you're basically splitting a tablet in half, for example.
Yeah, great question. Great question. You're right. It is not in and of itself a separate device. This is essentially like it's a complement to the existing device. It is useless on its own. So once you take that phone out, that screen is doing nothing. It turns off. It has no power. Not even a power source because the phone's battery is ultimately what's powering it. So in that sense, it's like you described. It's almost like having a monitor that's attached to, let's say, a laptop or another computer. You're extending the capability of the main screen.
And when is this available?
It's out now. I mean, you can get it now if you want to. Yeah, it's. I mean, it came out around the time, obviously, of the pandemic, so there were some issues, obviously, with that. But no, the phone's available now. Yeah, if people are interested, they can find it and they can get it.
But the overall specs for it, is it like a flagship phone, or is it kind of more of a mid-level as far as?
No, it's a flagship. Definitely a flagship. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Given the internals that are inside, you have Snapdragon 865 processor. You've got a decent amount of RAM. It's 8 gigs of RAM, so that's good. 128 gigs of storage. I would have liked a little more than that, but it's fine. You can always expand that with a MicroSD card slot, up to 2 terabytes actually. There is a headphone jack, which could be surprising to some people, right? You don't see too many of those on phones these days, but it's there. And you can still use it even when you have the extra screen on top. So that's possibly something that people might be interested in. But no doubt, the internals are flagship level. My one complaint I have, though, is that I wish they would have gone with a faster refresh rate as an option. It's 60 hertz. We're seeing phones come up with 90 or 120 now. And yes, it does make a difference. When you're using a phone, you're just navigating the interface. It does make a difference. Unfortunately, LG did not do that with this device. So, you're missing out on that, at least for people who care about that feature. But it's something that I wish they would have put in the phone. And I'm not crazy about LG's software. The Android overlay they use it's better than it used to be, but it's not great. But it is what it is.
It's still, I think, a pretty compelling option, though, when you think about the price point and the dual screen functionality. I mean, at around $1,000 for both of those things as a flagship device that has the specs to compete against its competitors, that's a pretty compelling price point for the novelty of a second screen, in addition to being a flagship device.
And I think that's one of the selling points, right? Because in effect, you'd be buying two screens. You're buying a phone that has this extra attachment on it that is supposed to be really, really useful. It's not something that you're going to throw away and forget about. The point is you're supposed to be using it all the time. I mean, one thing I love about the second screen too is because it articulates 360 degrees, you can actually prop up the phone too. So if you want to watch a video while you're eating something or something like that, you can just, you can sort of set it up like a tent, and you have a stand for the phone also. So there are some useful elements to the screen that work that way too. We should also bear in mind, I mean, OnePlus came out, with a new phone that is north of, it's $1,400 in the US. Sorry, here in Canada, actually, in the OnePlus 8 Pro. The regular OnePlus 8 is $1,100. So here we have a phone with a second screen that is in the same price range. People might find that compelling, or they might not have a need for it. So that's why it's kind of niche in that regard, in terms of the second screen. The phone itself is good, but it's up against stiff competition on its own.
I think that's kind of a neat aspect of this, though, is that you have the dual screen for, say, your work stuff or when you're trying to be really productive, but you can undock it when you're going out for dinner or something else.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to lug all of it. And that's kind of one of the challenges with some of these other devices, like from Samsung and other companies, is that, you're basically committing to this thing, whatever it is, and you can't reconfigure it at any time. So it's nice to have the option to sort of drop some payload if you need to, and go light if you're traveling or whatever.
Yeah. And LG talks about that too. And it is true. I mean, you can do that. If you want to lighten the load, you can. I mean, it's not a small phone necessarily on its own, but still, it's definitely very, very different when you don't have the screen attached to it. But still, it is that, I think it is that trade-off of like, are you going to use the second screen enough to justify paying for it? And my guess is yes, because I think people would find a use for it. I just don't know that they would necessarily be okay with the girth, just the extra weight that comes with that. That's one thing that Samsung has tried to address by doing their devices. The only thing is that Samsung's devices are more expensive to begin with. I mean, the Galaxy Fold is considerably pricier than this thing is. but they're also not the same. I mean, with the Galaxy Fold, you could have 3 apps open at the same time and use them. Here you can do 2. You can't do more than that. And if you are going to actually have the same app sort of spread over both screens, not every app supports that feature either. So oftentimes you're going to be using the 2 screens separately, but there are a lot of use cases for doing so. I think it's one of those form factors and designs that I've been out with it, and especially with the G8X before, obviously, the pandemic hit. And there were people who gave me a lot of looks with that phone. They were like, "What is that? Like, is that?" They thought it was a Samsung device, but I explained to them, "No, it's an LG device, and it's actually just a second screen. The phone comes out, whatever." I mean, it was a novelty that seemed to capture some attention, and I do think LG is hoping that is what they'll get from a device like this, that'll just kind of turn some heads,
We can't let this go without asking you about the camera on it as well, though.
Sure, yeah. So the camera's okay. It's not as good as I would like on its own, like on the face of it, in terms of the automatic modes. However, the manual mode, which I've always said is the best thing LG has on its camera and is well worth learning, is excellent. And they've added focus peaking on there. So if you're using manual focus in manual mode, you will see that, kind of a green, you'll see like something green on the screen indicating to you where the focus point is. So that'll help people, if they're shooting macro, if they're shooting something a little bit closer up, to make sure that they're focusing the right way. So it's a good camera, but only if you're using it to its fullest in terms of all the features that it has. When you're shooting just in auto, it's okay, it's decent. The low light shots are not as good at all compared to competitors, but the manual camera mode is definitely one of the best available.
And I guess there's no camera on the back of the second screen.
No. It's the second screen, when you flip it closed, has a small slit that will show you basic things like the time, the date, certain notifications, stuff like that. So you'll still have sort of a window into your phone, but it's a small one.
We've been talking with Ted Kritsonos all about the new LG V60. If you want to see a review, check out our website at GetConnectedMedia.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit that notification button to be notified about our next show.